uh, kick off something like this. Just a little quick background before we get going, so you kind of understand what's happening and why this is happening and taking place today. Just because of, or not just because of the climate we're in today, um, there have been some things that have not trickled down to our community that's there for us. And then there are also some things that have been created for our community that people aren't aware that they can access and utilize to improve or to assist their well-being in life in general. So right quick, Undivided, it's a movement, was created by three Black men, Mr. Shannon Danley, Mr. Troy Finley Sr., and myself, Edward Smitty Russell Jr. Um, the basis of this, of this brotherhood, I would call it, it's not a committee, it's a brotherhood. We did this one part to inform our community. We found that the information just was not getting down to the people that it was put in place to serve. Now, be it lack of communication, lack of not understanding the target audience. So we just was trying to do our part to make sure that we reached out to folks that could help, and then in turn give that information out to the public to use. Then also we wanted to encourage involvement and engagement with our community. Because if you just look around in your own town, and I don't know where everybody is from, but I can speak directly for Solano County. If you look around the different cities in Solano County, and you can start at the top with the mayors, the sheriff, the county sheriff, uh, city council, planning commission, school board meeting, or school board members of the school board, is the ratio of minorities on those particular positions is very small and almost embarrassing to a certain point. So in order for us, our thought process was to get to the table and have a conversation at the table. We first got to understand, how do you get to the table? Where's the table? Some of the things we are looking to do is encourage involvement and engagement. With that, we developed this 5-part webinar series uh, where we thought the first thing we should focus on is the overall health and wellness of the Black family and in families in general, because I think what we have to also understand, Black folks as well as Latinos and Asians and other people with some melanin in their skin, Pakistanians, Samoans, we all kind of, not the exact same battle, but we all have some things we need or could utilize to help us uh, better our family structure. So with that, we created this 5-part webinar series to hopefully attain some of those goals of informing the community. And today, obviously, is our first one, and we have 3 phenomenal speakers that's going to speak to you. Um, I'm going to let them give their little bio, but I will introduce them. They volunteered their time to give their insight and knowledge today. So this is not how they're going to speak. I'm just introducing them as we have it. First, we have Dr. Odell Johnson. He is Chief Executive Officer of RISE. And again, I will let Brother Odell go into his bio. Then we have Ebony Antione, founder of Broken by Violence. I will let her also again give her bio. That way there I don't make myself look foolish. And then finally, and last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Kimberly Douglas. She's the president of Remote Learning Solutions. And again, I can't wait to hear her bio also. And then before we just start getting into it, because I don't want to take a lot of time, I just want to do some housekeeping notes. And so what's going to happen is each of our speakers are going to have 15 to 20 minutes to speak on their focus point. All right. We will allow for questions after each speaker for that particular speaker. If you have a question, please hit the raise your hand button, or you can leave it in the chat area. And then Mr. Shannon Danley is in control of the chat, and he's in control of the mute. After all 3 have completed, we can have a open session for just general questions that may have come up when you missed the first time. So keep in mind, you always have time to ask questions. And then with that, I think our speaking order is up first. I have it right here. Don't hold me to it. Is Dr. Kimberly Douglas. It's all yours, ma'am.
Okay, so you said about 15 minutes. Okay, thank you all for the invitation today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Dr. Kimberly Douglas. I'm the president and CEO of Remote Learning Solutions. I'm also an associate professor at Middle Tennessee State University, and I teach in library science. And I'm in the southeastern region of the United States. So in Remote Learning Solutions, what I do is I coach people on how to develop their own online courses to generate passive income for themselves. And I do this, I like working with people who want to develop courses so that they have impact on a particular community. The community that I'm really looking to impact includes Black boys ages 4 to 9, and not just them, but also their families and their communities as well. So one of the areas that I really focus on, and in particular focus on, actually have a book coming out on Monday, and it's called You Are the Revolution. And it talks about education that empowers your Black child and also strengthens your family, co-written with Dr. Robin Harwick. In that book, we talk about the need to really focus on well-being. So there's a lot of conversation about whether kids are going back to school, not going back to school. So as I mentioned to you earlier, I teach librarians. And one of the things that I say to my students when I talk to them about the kind of projects they need to be working on, I say to them that they need to work on projects that will help families, help teachers transition back to school, whether that school is in person or if it's online. Now, when they transition back, I think it would be damaging for them to go in achievement, 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 academics, academics, academics. So remember, our kids have been through a pandemic for the past, by the time they go back to school, it will have been about 5 months. And so the basis of education this fall needs to be well-being. That needs to be the foundation. So teachers can go back and they can push academics and they can talk about, of course, based upon what they're being instructed to do, they can talk about test scores, they can talk about achievement, but it doesn't matter because we have all of these things surrounding our kids that we have to deal with. And so whatever materials my students come up with to help teachers transition, to help kids transition, it has to be based on well-being. It has to start with the fact that there's this threat that's all around the children. And then it also has to start with the fact that they're seeing the world being uprooted. Now, a lot of the changes that we're seeing are moving in a positive direction, but it is change. So, we talk about the book that talks about moving your cheese. So even if the cheese is not the best cheese, it's still being moved, and there's a lot of transition happening. So the kids will need opportunities and help transitioning with that. The other thing I say to my students is this. So they talk to me a lot. When I say students, I mean graduate students at the university. They talk about how when the kids come back, they're going to be so behind. There's learning loss. There's a summer slide. I understand that, and I get that. But I like to switch that around and reframe that conversation. So that conversation assumes that school is the foundation and home builds on top of school. I like to switch that around and say that home is the foundation and school should build on top of home. So these kids will have been out of school for 5 months. So you mean to tell me that in those 5 months, they haven't learned anything? And so I asked that question specifically to one of my graduate students, and she was like, well, yeah, they've gotten behind. I was like, I understand that, but you mean to tell me in 5 months they haven't learned anything? Okay, there are kids who have to take care of their siblings, and they have to read a macaroni box and figure out the directions and how not to burn the house down. And they have responsibilities that adults have. So you're saying that no learning has taken place there? And So my student was like, well, yeah, I guess you have a point. Yes, there is learning happening all the time, even through video games, living life. There are lots of kids who have lots of responsibilities. So if we reframe that and not start with the deficit or the loss of, and let's look at what they actually learned, and let's say that what they learned is valuable, and then we build on top of that, then that's a different conversation. So using that framework, then my student was able to see all the opportunities that schools now have to build on top of that. So, you know, they talk about scaffolding and building a bridge to from one thing to another. So if we scaffold from the fact that some learning has taken place, then when they come back to school, we now have to talk about their experience. We now have to deal with their experience and let them know that their experience was important. So the loss isn't the thing that we should be talking about the most with the kids, although the loss is important, we have to address that. But they don't necessarily come in broken and needing to be fixed. They come in just as they are, and the education should adjust to fit their needs. So something happened, they learned some things. They should be told that the things that they learned are valuable things, and here's how we're going to build on top of that.
Mm.
And so I was expressing to the librarians that their role in this is going to be key in pointing out resources that can really be of assistance to both the children and to the teachers as well. But just in general, even for people who might be considering homeschooling, and I understand that that's not an option to everybody, well-being is essential. And so it's not just well-being of the child, but also the family and how the child is related to people that they live with. They're related to a community. So there's a lot of conversation right now about, you know, we're allowed to talk about race a lot more in public spaces. And one of the things that I try to insert into the conversation is about relationships and not forgetting that a child exists in a situation where they have siblings, where they have a mother, they have a father, or they have a grandmother, or an aunt and uncle who are taking care of them. And they also have a community that is surrounding them as well. And so this individualism and going it alone has not really, it serves some purposes, but there are a lot of ways that we're not served by looking at everything that way. Within that community, within that context, there's a lot that they've picked up and there's a lot that they have gained. And I think school has a responsibility to build on top of that. So I'll take a break there for a second and just kind of take a breath and see if there are any questions or any comments.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Kimberly. My first question that I actually have is where can we get the book? Where is it going to be? Amazon, or is it going to be?
So it's on Gumroad, and I will put the
Okay.
links to both the downloadable copy and also the printed copy on there
Okay.
as well. And right now you can get it at a pre-sale discount. So thank you for asking about
Thank you.
that.
Thank you. And then I'd just like to touch on one of your points you made, which I thought was very profound, because myself, in my area that I'm looking to assist in is K through 12 education, and I
Mhm.
know here in Solano County, and then I also know in Oakland, only because I went to school in Oakland, the problems arise in early education. You know, those core values you're taught, and so I like the point you made about you're not broken, and you're not different because of the things you learned prior coming into first and second grade. What we have to do is just take those lessons and then build upon those lessons. Because I think life, I think your life lessons might benefit you better or assist you better if you have the right educator there teaching you, instead of trying to pound that round object into that square hole and say, no, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it this way. And so my question to you after all of that is, One, are you familiar with the LCAP? I'm not sure if they have it where you are. They have it here in California. And the LCAP uh, is basically designed for parents and other community members to be engaged with the school in designing the curriculum. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
I'm wondering if it has any relation to here. I know we have community schools where the parents are very engaged, not just parent involvement, but
Mhm.
really engaged in the curriculum, in also taking classes themselves, being part
Mhm.
of the community there. But
Mhm.
that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's not a community school. What basically the California Board of Education has done is implement this program for each local district uh, to provide better curriculum, a more
Okay.
structured curriculum that the parents and the community would like to see. And it's kind of it's not it's encompassing the entire district and the entire population of the school, but it's for and designed for low income students, students of color, and English second language learners.
Okay.
Um, and they're trying to basically say is the more impact you have, the more investment you're going to put in, the more time you're going to put in, and hopefully the end result is a better comprehension of whatever that curriculum is being taught. So,
Okay. Okay.
all right.
That's good. Yeah. Thank you for that information. That's really interesting. And you know that you're in California, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're often an incubator and an innovator ahead of a lot of states. So, but I definitely want to follow up with that and
Really.
see, yeah, and understand more about it. I just
Okay.
haven't heard of it yet. And I think somebody has a question here. So
Okay.
hold on just a moment.
That's a long
Right.
question.
So there's a question from Mitzi Russell. And she said, you talked about those children and youth who actually have real life learning and experiences that are experiencing during the COVID pandemic. What curriculum do you anticipate educators will use to discuss those learnings? I believe that the youth don't even realize they're learning real life lessons and need educators to point out those learnings when there is an absence of certain levels of parenting available to them at home. Thank you. Thank you, Mitzi. I appreciate that question. That's a really good question. I don't know exactly because everything varies from district to district, but I am working on a curriculum that will go on top of special education learning. And I have my doubts about whether or not education will take place in person in the fall. So the curriculum that I'm designing for special education is mainly is more so suited for online learning. And the curriculum that I am working on, and it's just one program, so it wouldn't be the whole special education. It is a self-directed learning, but it's also project-based learning with mixed stage individuals. And so with it being project-based learning and also mixed age, the children would have the opportunity to come up with projects that would be interesting to them. And so I'd like to see more things like that, where they decide on something that sparks their curiosity, something that's important to them. Wherever I go, wherever I can, I will say that it's really important to take the experience, the learning experiences that the children have had and build on top of that. You know, what we're really talking about here is values. What do we value? Do we value what they have to say? Do we appreciate their experiences? Um, I think state test scores can be a distraction in this process. So before all this happened, schools talked about 21st century learning, and then 21st century hit. The 21st century means that we have contact with people all over the world. It also means that we can share diseases and we can share viruses. And so when the 21st century demanded something from us, we were not able to rise to the occasion. But there are kids at home right now who are practicing 21st century skills, things that school said that they knew and that they understood. So there are four categories that we typically think about: collaboration, communication, um, critical thinking, and creativity. And if that is happening in the home, in any of those four areas, there's something there that you can build upon. The other thing, and I know we had talked about this for another program with this group, I just want to say, I just want to applaud parents who have tried to find different ways to make this work. And I know sometimes as parents, we feel like we're not doing enough or we're not doing the right thing. But parents have added a lot of value to this situation. There's a lot of unpaid labor happening right now. And them trying to take up the banner and trying to make things happen and trying to keep things going. So I just want to give a shout out to parents. And I want to say to a lot of parents out there, you are adding value and what you're doing does matter and it will show up. And it looks like somebody has their hand up.
Yeah, I think she was just clapping. Beatrice was clapping.
I'll take it.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And I want to wrap up real quick, but I don't want to leave without asking this. So here in the state of California, the Department of Education just released maybe like a month ago, if and when school does in fact go back to brick and mortar this coming fall, white students will be at 4 months, generally speaking, behind. And then that gap increases to 10 months to 11 months for Black and Latinos. What they did not address is special education. I mean, just from your point of view, I mean, how absolutely incredible of a setback will this be for our children who experience learning disabilities?
Right. Well, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but really, this is about loving them. I have a PhD, so I obviously appreciate education. But I think this is a time to really show love and affection and to show them that they're wanted and that they're needed. Now, there are some real needs out there, some physical needs, some emotional needs, and those needs are going to be there. I think the emotional needs, I would focus on the emotional needs over the academic needs. And I understand that people, the kids are behind, but they really need the safety and the security because it's hard to move forward if you don't have that. And we see this all the time with students. They could be high achieving students, but without that safety and that security and that feeling of being wanted and that feeling of belonging, they're just things that just constantly, themes that keep coming up in their lives over and over again. The fact of the matter is we all are kind of stalled or maybe paralyzed in some ways. But I think this is an important time to rally around the kids and show them that they're cared for and that they are protected.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberly, for that great insight. From the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate it. If there's no more questions, we can quickly move on to Miss Ebony Antione. The floor is yours, ma'am. Can't hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you. So I thank everybody for taking their Saturday to be in this space where we give information about what we are, basically our goals in life and how we believe the world is impacting us and how we can give back. So my name is Ebony Antione and I am the Executive Director of Broken by Violence. Broken by Violence is my way of giving back to my community. So Broken by Violence is a bereavement support group that provides resources to victims of gun violence. We are now venturing into domestic violence as well as sexual assault because violence is violence. And unfortunately, the way in which that we deal with violence, I believe, hinders the way in which we show up in society. I believe that people of color have a shortage of resources, which is what made me create this program. So I've had my own personal experience with violence. I lost my husband violently. And through that experience, I realized that there was a shortage of services that were available to me and my children. So basically what I could not find, I decided to create, and here you have it, Broken by Violence. And my overall goal is just to be more active in the community, because I think we've normalized what violence is. I believe that in our community, we do a GoFundMe, we do a hashtag, we do a t-shirt. And I believe that people's lives are worth so much more. Nobody thinks about the devastation of the children, the parents, the siblings, the wives, the partners. You know, unfortunately, in my life, I grew up in East Oakland, and it was normal. It was normal to walk past caution signs or to hear gunshots. And I just feel like at this point in life, it should not be normal. It should be something that we definitely process. I think that is definitely something that overall, we basically see the way in which it shows up in our community. Underserved, we look at the jobs, we look at the education, we look at the criminal justice system. And I believe that because of violence, it does affect the way in which you show up in the world. So my overall goal for Broken by Violence was more so to protect my children, to give them hope, to find out what I could do to make sure that they feel safe in this world. And raising a African-American teenager at this point, it definitely scares me. You know, not only are we nervous about the police, but we're also nervous about showing up in our community. And so what I want to do is have a transparent dialogue amongst people who have dealt with violence, and just what that does. You know, it definitely has to show up in your life somehow, whether in relationship, whether in work, whether, in the way in which we parent. So basically, that's pretty much what I do here at Broken by Violence. We're fairly new. We've been in existence since 2017. Right now, I'm working on a program where it's called Spoken, and what it is breaking the cycle of violence by not keeping silent. I believe there's so much power in your story. I think that once you start telling your story, it gives people a optimistic view of who you are, why you think the way in which you think, and why you show up the way you do in the world. I'm also trying to create a virtual platform where we have a healing circle, where it will look very similar to this because of the coronavirus, but it will give us an opportunity to share, an opportunity to just for a moment to breathe, to not so much take in what's going on in the world, but just to process whatever it is that you're dealing with. I think that we all have dealt with some sort of violence. I mean, I could be incorrect, but in my experience, I haven't crossed anyone that has not had some sort of violence that they've encountered in their life. And sometimes it's worse than others, and you can tell by the way in which it shows up. I believe that PTSD in our community is absolutely, I believe, the reason why there is such high crime rates in urban communities or in underserved communities. I think that if you believe that the person who shot you or shot at you is still living, then you are more alert. That you believe that, oh, this may look like John who shot me, and so you react. And in reality, that wasn't John. And now you've taken another son from a mother and a father. You've taken another father from a child. And somehow, some way, we need to just be transparent and share what we're going through in life and just become better. And that's my overall goal. My contribution to my community is that we need to heal. We need to heal and be better.
Thank you, Miss Ebony. And I'm not sure if anyone has a question. I don't see nothing in the chat. But I would like, just for transparency, as Miss Ebony said, I had the opportunity and the pleasure to have Miss Ebony be a guest on my podcast, where I just want to follow up on something she had touched on the podcast, was the holistic part of healing through trauma. I think back to Dr. Kimberly's point on the early education of things and the life lessons we learn. Quickly, folks want to ingest our young folks with pain medication and just other unnecessary medication. I would just, Ms. Ebony, could you just kind of expand on some of the healing way techniques that you might utilize, not just for young folks, but that was my kind of focal point, but adults as well.
Absolutely. So for me, I really find benefits in mindful meditation. I think that when you start relaxing and focus on your breathing, you realize that you're really tense. Once you drop your shoulders and you start focusing on your breathing, I don't know, something comes over you to where your mind is clear. You're focused on where you are at that moment. You're not focused on what's next. You just really take that moment. Let me also interject and say that there may be circumstances where people do need medication, but I think that that should be your last course. I think that your body and your mind has certain elements within it to heal yourself. I think that now if that fails and you can't, then absolutely, I would say seek help from a mental professional who you trust, who's not just big on diagnosing and prescribing. But I definitely believe that exercise, that absolutely has helped me. Those endorphins, get them moving. I think that talk therapy, I think that was huge. I think when I first started out with my own trauma, I was going 3 times a week, and it really was working. That unbiased opinion of speaking to someone about what your fears are and not being categorized as crazy or weak. In our community, I believe that we definitely don't want to be weak. I believe that the melanin in our skin says that we're supposed to be inferior, like nothing's supposed to break us. And I think that that's definitely false. I think that we all get to a point in life where we say, this is a lot, this is too much. And so if you get there, and then I think you need to look for help. I think you definitely need to exercise, definitely find a good therapist or psychologist. And I think healthy eating, I think all of that, what you put into your body is typically what you get out. So yeah, I definitely believe in the holistic manner of healing.
Thank you very much.
Real
Shannon,
quick.
did you have some?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind expanding, what I'm wondering is, and we spoke about it, there are no programs for victims. And there's restorative justice programs for ex-felons, for everybody else. Is there a way of expanding a little bit more on that as to where, how do we start creating programs? Because a lot of the people, they don't understand, yes, there's victims out there that need help, but the families of them that are formerly incarcerated, they become victims themselves. So how do we expand on that?
That's a great question. That's something that troubles me and stops the growth of my organization at this point. I mean, I'm reaching out for funding. I'm submitting grants. I'm hiring grant writers. I believe that there is no restoration for the victim. I think that the loss of life is final. So I think that reaching out, I mean, okay, so let's be clear. The state of California, the victim of crime, I believe every state has one. I think that that's their way of saying that we will try to supplement your loss. And that is a very minute and a very minimal process of helping. $2,000 to relocate is what they give you in the state of California. You can't find a 1-bedroom for $2,000 in most cities in California. So how does that help you start again? I think that they will bury you, and that's what I found out in the state of California. We will give you someone to talk to, and we will bury your loved one. But I absolutely believe that there needs to be more funding. It needs to be more advocacy about helping victims, because hurt people hurt people. So if you are mentally unstable and you don't have a faith in something higher than yourself, and you're not seeking the help, and like myself, I have 3 children. So what happens to those children? I mean, I'm very grateful that God has given me enough to sustain them. I'm glad that I went out and found the help, but I'm also raising a son. So very likely in our community, they find their own family, whether it be in gangs or they find drugs. And so my thing is, absolutely, there should be more funding for programs for victims. I definitely understand the concept of restorative justice as far as reentry programs and so forth. But I believe that in this, with the Black Lives Matter, I believe that this is an awakening to say, it does matter. How do we get help? How do we heal from the trauma of many generations, the violence? I mean, we're just not okay. We absolutely have to process it. So, I mean, like we spoke about, me and you, Shannon, spoke about the violence in Chicago. Like, you rarely see any programs. You rarely see people going into those areas and helping those families. And now we have kids being killed by stray bullets. And I mean, it's heartbreaking. It really is. And overall, my whole purpose in honestly being on this platform as well is partnering with other organizations so that we can make a more powerful impact than I can make by myself. So overall, I guess reaching out, trying to get more funding for programs for victims is the overall goal.
That's an outstanding question, Shannon. And I think we have conversations amongst ourselves about the whole PSD. But I want to touch on that real quick before we get to Brother Odell, because I know he's waiting. Ebony, that point, the hurt people, that's crucial. But I want to tie that to what you said earlier about the funding and, just not enough programs or funding financially to help victims here in the state of California. And again, I can't speak outside of California because I don't know. But I think that's the purpose of this. But I want to tie it back to what you said earlier about the transparency of dialogue. And again, if this is for our community and informing them, and we can already see that centuries into, I think it was you or Dr. Kimberly said, the generations of anguish that been burdened to each one of us. Do we continue to wait for this magical funding to come, or that transparency of dialogue? Can we start to have that within our family and at work, at school? I mean, because to your point, Black folks, we're supposed to be strong. We're not supposed to be vulnerable. We're not supposed to be weak. So we carry things on. And, how do we do that? And I don't know if that's maybe for you, Mrs. Ebony, maybe it's Dr. Kimberly, but like, where does this dialogue begin? Where do we begin with this? Especially for Black men, because I speak for myself. It's hard. You coming up, they don't teach you to speak. They teach you to be hard. So where do we start this transparency dialogue?
I will start and then I will pass it to Dr. Douglas because I know that this is her forte. But I would say at home. I feel like that home should be the safe place where you start. I think that in marriages and in relationships, you need to be transparent. You need to be vulnerable. I feel like for a Black man and a Black woman, I feel like your garment should be down. Your sword should be down. Your breastplate of protection should be down. I feel like that should be the one place where you're transparent. And it definitely shows up in relationships in our community. I mean, marriage rates are completely down. I mean, just the success coming out of families, just the college, people going to college. But I'll definitely pass it to you, Dr. Douglas.
Thank you, Ebony. Yeah, so that's a very complex question. I think the first thing we have to do is we have to be committed to a different outcome. So again, I take things back to the educational realm, and I think about how many young men are harmed by the fact that there is a push out that happens in the classroom. So, separate from things that might be happening at home, they get told very early that school is not a place for them. And so all of us are going to find a place where we fit and where we belong. So if you got kids being pushed out of kindergarten and pre-K, then you are creating a situation where you're saying that there really is no place for you in society. And so kids match the expectation that is on them. Again, I go back to well-being. We have to say that we are committed to well-being, because when we start in after everything that's happened, and we get this thing where we're talking about achievement, we're talking about academics, that is very, very important. It's important to me. But if we start in a conversation about well-being, then that changes who surrounds our kids. So if you're talking about well-being going back into school, then that means you have more counselors and more social workers surrounding them than you do cops. And if we start back in with test scores and this lesson and that lesson, that's a way of the adults around them disconnecting from them. We need for the adults that are around our kids to be committed to connecting to them. And if they're unwilling to connect, then nothing's going to change. Then nothing will change.
Okay, I agree with you, and since this is about health and wellness of the family, that's why I asked that question, because I think most of us have children, and regardless of what we want to perceive our children as, even in the perfect household, whatever your normal looks like, we think our children are okay, and we kind of just like overskip it. And I want to tell a quick story right before I let Dr. Odell get on and do his thing. And this hit as a Black man. I can only speak to the other brothers on here and maybe the sisters. I don't know if you'll understand this or not, but I lost my younger cousin a couple years ago in a car accident. And we had a conversation, me and some other Black men, we was part of this group. And I don't even know how it came up, but someone said, you should tell your kids you love them every day. And I sat there and I was like, and I had both of my sons there and I was like, it dawned on me. I was like, I don't do that, And then my cousin, whose son got, killed in the car accident, was like, Smith, how come you don't tell them you love them every day? And I was like, they know that. I don't have to tell them. They know I love them. I'm here. I've got a roof over their head. They eat every day. And he was like, nah, And from that day on, I'm like, oh, okay, just being present isn't being a father, and it isn't really even being a man. So that dialogue of transparency, to say I love you, to give them guys a hug, just to let them know, I think that starts hopefully the conversation of actually doing that transparency dialogue that Mrs. Ebony talked about. So again, I would just like to share that with you to say, hey, tell someone you love them today. Brother Odell, I know you've been sitting there waiting, man. It is all yours. I apologize for taking so long.
No problem, no problem. I've been really enjoying the dialogue between everyone. And thank you, Dr. Douglas, as well as Ebony, for sharing on both of y'all's behalf in regards to the areas in which you're focused. This is it. This is what we got. We are now living in a time that none of us have ever experienced before. All that's going on in the country, the pandemic intersected with race, relations, and then we talk about the healing modalities that need to be in order to get through this. Now, this is not new for Black America at all. We have, as all you know, we have a history of being in this intersection, in intersections like this for the last 401 years. But to tell a little bit about myself, my name is Dr. Odell Johnson. I am a professor at Pacific Oaks College, teaching community psychology, examining the power of whiteness in comparison to Blackness and other racial groups. And my class is filled with people. In the last month, we just started a summer 2 program, and the program is just filled up with people that don't look like me. So we have a lot of people from Bulgaria, from Spain, and from the United States, and the Latinx community that are jumping in these classes, trying to understand what's happening with race and what's happening with Black people in America, and trying to really kind of understand, like the underlying factors of why all of this is going on, all the complacency and complicity that they have experienced. And we even have Indians from India who have historically been very cast against Black people, African people in their country as well as here, that are now trying to understand the connection between the Indian countries that are in the Asian communities in the East, and how they interconnect historically from some kinship, which they are very much kin to African people in that particular region of the world. Also, I'm the founder of Research Institute for Social Equity. That was the former name, and now the name is changed it to Institute for Education and Justice. And I feel that education is really the pathway to really achieving justice. We need to educate our community about who they are, where they come from, as well as what they need to do to step on the platform and create their own platform for themselves to be able to do the things they need to do. We no longer can rely on political, parties as well as people to resolve our issues. Now we are in a paradigm to where we've got to come together, first of all, in our own homes to collect that particular power within ourselves to be able to nurture our own homes, and then allow that to transcend to the world and other groups and partner and collaborate within our communities to achieve this healing that we so greatly need at this time of trauma. That's really what it is. It's a trauma. It's trauma. It's apartheid, and it's all those things that we've seen before. Also, I am a candidate for the Soros Justice Foundation, pushing policy reform around clemency and pardons for people that are in disparity, particularly African-American men and women who don't receive pardons as readily as other groups, particularly white groups, as well as other groups. And so I'm pushing policy. I will be pushing policy in the fall in southern states around this initiative, because the governor of one state has too much power. He needs oversight, in my belief, to be able to make those decisions about the lives of individuals who are living potentially in infamy once they are released from jail, that they still are criminal for the rest of their natural born life. So I'm going to be pushing those kind of issues as well. Also, I consult with tech companies here in the Bay Area. I've worked with a few tech companies such as CheckR, which is the leading new technological background check company for people with criminal records, that they can do a background check in about 24 hours, when usually it takes a week when you go through a live scan. So, and sometimes they turn it around a lot faster. This initiative is really around the Fair Chance Hiring Ordinance here in California, where we are trying to get people back to work that have barriers and issues of criminal justice, histories. Those have been impacted by the justice system. And so Google, not Google, but CheckR, Slack, as well as Facebook are now on board. So I've actually provided some consultancy for those companies, and actually conducted research to kind of share with them that people that get out of jail are wounded. And oftentimes they are saying, give them a job, give them a house, and everything will be all right. They can pay their bills, they can report to their parole officer and meet their financial responsibilities or any restitution fees that they may have. But that's, we found that when we did the research, that there's so many other types of disconnects. There's 456 barriers to reentry. There's so many other disconnects around family, around mental health, around substance use, and all these things are still going on, those things that were going on prior to the time that they entered into the system. And so these people are coming out, on this platform and becoming, they're teaching them how to code while they're in prison, and allowing them to get high school diploma as well as a degree. And then they say, okay, we have a platform for you to come and work on. But what they found was that when people come onto that platform, there's a disconnect of the social emotional skill set to be able to be in an environment around people who they really kind of have a lot of phobia about, who don't feel like they really receive them. And if they really told them the truth about who they were and what the experiences are, then there would be another stigma placed on them, and that kind of makes them back up. And it makes them recidivate as well. So also, finally, I'm a mind-body medicine practitioner, and I believe in my whole initiative around healing is around education enrichment, which covers all spectrums of life. I think that if we use education it could be an education of how to be a better parent in the home, or how to be a father who's been disconnected from his child, and how do you rebuild that relationship and heal that woundedness that the child is experiencing, as well as what you have been experiencing, as well as the mother as well. So how do we really bring those families back together as a whole unit? And so I look at factors like that. But we must know that we really are the power. We are the captain of our ships. With all that's going on right now, we need to ask ourselves, we need to take a moment out. And I think that I go to Zoom meetings all the time, during the week, And oftentimes, we never take the time to really be present and understand, why are we here? Like, why are we here in this moment? Are we here just to have a dialogue and talk about all the great things that we're doing with our initiatives? Are we here to really be in this space and embody the issues around pain and suffrage that we are experiencing as a community? Are we here to support ourselves? Are we here to support others? I mean, really probe those questions about, why are we here in this moment right now? And so, and then we have to really be real honest about, how do we feel about what we're experiencing right now? You know, in this time, you know, where we are bombarded with information from every social system and media that there is, everybody has an opinion about what's going on. How do we feel in our gut? How do we really, really speak to ourselves about what's happening? Do we really take the time to examine our own emotions about this? Are we taking time to do our own healing daily? You know, not just once in the morning when we get up in our meditative, in our private space, but do we actually walk with this all day? Do we walk with a meditative spirit all day long? Because we need to. You know, when we come to a stoplight, you know, we pull it up, we're driving, we get so busy, come to the stoplight, and right now we kind of like just coming off a spring, do we take the time to notice the flowers bloom on the side of the road at the red light? Do we take the time to look around and be present and really, you know, really pull from this nature that we have that nurtures us, that we get so much, you know, strength and life from? You know, Ebony, you did a great job, and when you talked about, you know, all those things that we need for health and well-being, and I really appreciate you sharing that. But we really do need to do this more regularly. So we talked about a lot of things, and Ebony and Dr. Douglas shared a lot of great things. And I just want to take this time to really go into that space where we just kind of really examine how we feel right now. I mean, we really kind of just settle in and take a deep breath and breathe in deeply, slowly, what we're feeling, and exhale slowly, not worrying about any answers about what we feel, but we will allow the universe or God that be to work out the details. And so, if you don't mind, I'd like to maybe put some music in the background, because I really want to go through this thing so we can kind of really get centered here. And let me know if you can hear this, by the way. Okay, here we go. Can everybody hear this? Can you hear it okay? Is it too loud? If it's too loud, just let me know. All this going on right now. What are we feeling? We must ask ourselves, is this the day for healing? Is this the moment in our lives for our own healing and self-care? What do we want? What do we want to do with what God has given us? The skills, the understanding, the experiences. How do we share it back to others to empower them to be the best of who they are? I would like to ask you to consider these 3 questions. Don't worry about answering them within yourself. Don't worry about any details. But ask yourself, who am I? Who am I in this moment? What do I really represent? Am I here just to be here because everyone else is here? Or am I here for a divine purpose? am I here to show up and bring all of me to the conversation, to the experience? Who am I in this space? And two is, what do I want to give to the world? What do I want to give to my family? What I want to give to myself? And when I find out what I want to give, who do I give it to? Do I give it to just myself, or I share it with the world? What do I want? And third, how do I serve? Continue to breathe in, breathe in, and out. In and out. Breathe in gently and out. The final question is, how do I serve? How do I serve myself? How do I serve others? And how do I serve the world? With all that's going on, as I mentioned earlier, where do you fit in? Where do you find yourself? How do you find yourself fitting in? Can you identify an area that you can show up and provide support and service to others? How are you feeling? What are you feeling now? Continue to breathe in slowly and exhaling slowly. In and out. Breathing in to sweep out all the trauma and debris and pain and experiences that keeps us away from our destiny. And breathing out all the things, cleaning like a broom is sweeping the floor, the dust, the collective dust of suffering. And now we become present. We come back present. And now we realize and we rejoice in why we are here. We are here for one reason, and that reason is just to serve. You can open your eyes now. And you can become present. So I wanted to do a meditation and experiential around that because I just wanted to take some time out. You know, because we all are talking all the time, all day. I mean, this is really one of the most unique experiences I've ever experienced in this, you know, since I've been on the planet. And whereby we are seeing this pandemic, you know, going through that, and then mostly people of color being impacted by it. And then we're seeing Black lives, you know, being snuffed away, the drop of a dime. You know, they've always been snuffed away like that. We just happen to see them because we have more technology. People are more aware and they're doing things and they're showing up as much as they can. And so I appreciate that. And there's gonna be a lot more to come we are just kind of at the cusp of what's about to unfold. We don't know what that is, but it's certainly going to be a better day, I hope, in the future, because I do rely on hope to drive my intentions. That I hope that, that I'm hopeful that there's going to be a great resolve at the end of all of this at some point in the future. And we are the soldiers. We are the warriors that are in this army, that we are creating this movement that we have going on, that Black lives do matter. And so I appreciate just being here in this space with you all. And I would like for us to continue having this dialogue, continue to have these moments of healing and really getting centered about what are we doing and why are we here. And so thank you for allowing me to share my experiences with you.
Brother Odell, hey, that energy was powerful, man. I appreciate it. It was strong. I took it in, I internalized it. And if it didn't move you, you just didn't feel it. That's all. So I appreciate that. I actually have a question directly for you. And that was in the beginning, you spoke about the classes that you have and the other nationalities that come in looking to get enlightened, I guess, on a Black experience. My question is, if you can answer this, is what are their preconceived notions of us?
Well, they don't have any preconceived notions of us. Mm-hmm. Notions are of them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my students that are from Spain and Bulgaria, or whatever, you know. So anyway, a lot of those students, when they first started writing their papers, they write their papers about their own experiences in their own countries growing up. And I had to really navigate them and say, listen, you know, you're in America going to school, and I need you to write about what's happening with George Floyd. You know what I mean? And so it's a very uncomfortable situation for me to write about George Floyd because they have been somewhat trained up. I've had a student tell me, hey, in my country, in China, you know, we come up, you know, generation after generation, understanding, you know, taught by our parents that when you get to America, if you want to have the best life, move into a Black community and open for some kind of business, and you become rich and you can send all your kids to school. And that is so true, you know. And also India also have the same kind of perceived notion of us, but India is even more racist than Asians against Blacks. So I openly admit that because they have a caste system in their country where they are prejudiced against dark-skinned Indians. They are so white, you know, so you know what I mean. So the notions, the perceived notions is that Black life really is a mess. They're not saying that it doesn't matter, but it's like, I don't really want to engage with Black life unless it's gonna be about my life being empowered, you know, through coming into their communities and open up a Subway or, you know, things of that nature, or wow. Chinese food. And that's pretty much all they have for us. I mean, if you notice when they come into our communities, if you go into any of their stores, they don't have any resources for us. They don't even accept debit cards for Blacks. They don't even have a bathroom if you have to use the restroom. Because they're there for one intention, that is to take wealth out of the community, and they do it very well.
Very well. Shannon, you have something?
Brother Odell, we've been speaking on a number of occasions. Mm-hmm. I would just like that. I'd like a little bit of feedback about, and I know I mentioned it to Ebony, when it comes down to the victims. And as far as the trauma, we have people that are incarcerated that don't know or realize that they're victims themselves. And how do we get around that to where we can actually help them?
Well, we really got to change the narrative of what they've been told and what they've been taught. You know, I mean, just recently, San Francisco just passed an ordinance that, you know, you can no longer call formerly incarcerated people felons or convicts or things like this. So languaging is now becoming the new norm in San Francisco. I think it's kind of making a little thread in other kind of, you know, surrounding states like Seattle and Washington. So now we got to really start from the bottom and dismantle all that stereotypical stuff, you know, and really give people the, you know, a different kind of meaning of who they are and make them feel that they are headed towards some whole restoration of rights and citizenship. Because it's going to take a while, because we got so many policies that we're working on right now, we pushing, and, you know, they're just kind of like way down the line, you know? And so until that happens, I think we got to meet each person individually on their own terms and help them to understand that they are still a human being. I know you've been hurt. I know you've gone through a lot. And it's nothing nice, you know, and I know you don't know where you're going to head to the next day. I mean, it's a lot of fear. I mean, I meet a lot of guys that are so scared when they get out, man, when they don't even go to the grocery store, you know, because they say, if I go in the grocery store, I don't want them to profile me and think that I'm doing anything because I'm on parole or probation. Or either I go into the grocery store, and now I'm dealing with my cycle stuff where I don't even know what to buy because they've been giving me this on AIM toothpaste for the last 20 years. And so I've seen all these different, you know, forms of toothpaste on the counter, and it makes my whole level of anxiety go up through the roof. I can't even go shopping. So we got to really, you know, really hold their hands and mentor them and teach them how to go into those spaces, you know, and actually begin to evolve and take their time to recollect themselves. They have been traumatized. And no one will admit it. The criminal justice administrators and the practitioners and the health directors of correctional departments will not even address it. There's no funding in that department for mental health that just substantiates what they've gone through. So the resolve is that now, you know, even though we have seen some reduction in the criminal justice system, the numbers are still the same. There's still 2.3 million people that are locked up. There's still 4 million people on probation or parole. And the majority of those people are us at the rate of 73%. And so nothing is changing for us. So it's a recycling. That's why I'm more on the outside saying, okay, let them do what they're doing on the inside. I would like to receive them on the outside to give them this educational enrichment program to whereby they can be whole, because this is a really holistic program. We're not just dealing with, you know, giving somebody a job and a house. We really want to deal with people around their mental health and also their brokenness. We want to bring an experience of the peer-to-peer, you know, into the conversation where, you know, we got brothers that are successful out here that, and sisters, you know, have gone and doing some great work. And we want those people to be your mentor and show you how to walk that walk. You know, and we're not talking, we're just saying talking. We already know that there's some gaps in here that are not being addressed, is leading these people back into their prison system, in which that's, you know, and that is working for the status quo, the power, you know, sources that actually are trying to maintain the system.
Okay. Well, with that being said, now this last question, I guess it applies to Dr. Douglas, Dr. Odell, Ebony, all three of you guys. With all three nonprofits that you guys are in, the work that you guys are doing, is there a way to where when they hit like Dr. Douglas from youth, is there a way to prevent them from ever having to go to Ebony or seek services from you, Dr. Dell?
Okay, so I guess I'll go first. I think addressing these issues at the age of 5 years old is very important. We have to make school a space where Black children belong. Right now, the message is very strong that they don't belong there. And that message is increasingly being sent to Black girls as well as to Black boys. And that's where earlier, you know, I was talking about the connection. If the people who work there, so we hear a lot right now about an anti-racist curriculum. And whether you call this anti-racist, however you want to categorize it, if the people who are there are unwilling to connect emotionally with our kids, then they shouldn't be teaching them. They just shouldn't. And I remember hearing this guy did a TED Talk, and he was saying that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And so people feel disconnected from everybody else, and they feel disconnected from themselves. And we are telling kids very early that you do not belong here. You are disconnected from here. And so, you know, when the conversations come up about an anti-racist curriculum, or however you want to frame that, we can't go back and just have conversations about race and talk about how wonderful it is if little Black boys, little white boys hold hands, embrace each other. That's not enough. So just having an academic conversation about it or having an individual exchange is not enough. What we also have to see is we also have to see our kids have voice and be decision makers and to be part of some democratic process that happens at school. So, because it's not just for Black kids, other kids need to see our children sharing in decision making and sharing in the healing. And they have to be taught, not just through words, but through practice, that Black lives do matter. And that the teacher's going to call on the Black child as much as she calls on the white child. And that a Black child doesn't have to fit into some expectation that he's going to fail very early.
And so Shannon also, I'd like to, so Dr. Douglas and I were talking, with her colleague, Ms. Dr. Hartwick, and they introduced me to this concept about project-based learning and how it actually could be a very powerful program for people, particularly over at Atlanta College, community college, where you are. And I would really like to educate you about this. The more I learn about it, it really resonates with me. But so, Dr. Douglas, can you explain to Shannon how that actually works in regards to people that are formerly incarcerated? Because Shannon actually works at the community college, and he's working with students and getting students in that are formerly incarcerated. And I think that that platform would be a good incubating kind of like research, thing that we could do with his organization.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, because I could talk about that all day long. So right. Project-based learning is built on, so it's also related to something we call self-directed learning, and that people are naturally curious. So you hear people talk about it a lot with smaller children, but I think it can also be used for adults as well. And so the idea is that we're naturally curious. We want to learn things. We want to educate ourselves. And so you add the project-based piece to it. It means that we're not sitting back just looking at a textbook, but I have actively chosen something that's interesting to me and I want to build it. So the project could be a gourmet meal you want to put together, or it could be some sort of model, or it could be starting a program, whatever interests you. And there are opportunities within that to learn a lot of different things. So if you want to run a program, then you have to come up with a budget. So you use math. If you need volunteers for that program, you have to figure out how many volunteers you need, how you need to talk to those volunteers, what your procedures are going to be about bringing in volunteers. So, so as far as people who are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, there's a process of laying out what project-based learning is and how it can help them understand things like English and writing, and how it can help them understand math. So it covers multiple subjects at once, because you have to have all these skills in order to be able to complete your project. Now, the way we talked about it is that the instructor really is a facilitator. So you go to the facilitator and you say, this is what I need to complete my project. So you have to plan, you have to strategize, you have to think about what it is you need. And so, and going back to, Smitty was talking about the parents participating in curriculum. This is you basically creating your own curriculum about what you think is important to you. So if you're doing that, that means you're going to really learn a lot more because it interests you, at a gut level. And nobody's saying, well, you have to dissect this sentence and you have to write this paragraph. You're going to want to do those things because they're connected to something that's very important to you. And the instructor, as the facilitator, then helps you get the resources that you need. You can establish learning goals from the beginning, but you as the student do that with the help of the facilitator. And so if you think about what that does, is it gives you personal agency. It gives you voice. It teaches you how to be a decision maker. And it's not me as a teacher with all the knowledge and you're an empty vessel and I'm just here to pour into you. This is, you came to the table with your own information and your own knowledge, and it has value. So it was sort of like I was saying earlier, when these kids go back to school, they don't go back as empty vessels. Something has happened with them. They've had experiences, they've learned things. They're not empty. So teachers need to find out what's there that they can work with. So the same thing with adults. They're not empty vessels. They have experience, they have information that matters. So how do you take that and how do you work with that?
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I was saying, Shannon. Is we're talking about doing some stuff like that. And I really want to be very innovative. I think that students that are, for example, someone wants to be a rapper. I hear a lot of that. I want to be a rapper. I want to be some kind of artist, right? When they get out of jail, because that's what they do, right? That's what they've been doing. And so they're often discouraged when they get out. They have to go in these old dark places in the hood, to try to find a studio. It never gets out, it becomes underground and all that. But we can create an environment, on campus, at your college, at Solano, working with the program that you with, Shannon, that we can say, okay, you can be a rapper, but you need to learn how to do the boards, learn how to do the engineering, how to write how to, and the business side of it, how do you do all that? So let's create some projects that's going to teach you how to do that. So you're going to have to be kind of forced to write and do research to find out how to do that. And at the end of the day, after the course is over, they become a lot more empowered and knowing what they're talking about. When they go after a deal, they're not going to be so at risk of being screwed. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Right. So,
Hey,
that was,
sorry about that, Shannon. But before I lose my train of thought, the education enrichment, Brother Odell's talking about, I spoke about earlier, I think is important. But I have a question to all three of you, because even though each of you kind of at a different phase of the adult mind maturity, I think it all comes together at one point. And my question would be, is what does your healing look like? And I asked that question because me and my wife have a conversation in our house, or had a conversation of, what's your freedom look like? Because I know our freedom don't look like some of our friends' freedom. So, I would ask you guys, if we're talking about healing, what does healing look like?
let's start with Ebony.
So what does my healing look like? I think that you take it one day at a time. Today's a good day. I think that today I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this platform. I'm grateful for my children. I'm grateful for the strength to see through another day. I think that the healing journey is one day at a time. I hope tomorrow is just as good as today. I know Father's Day was rough for me. My daughter turned 21 on that day, and then Father's Day is the absence of what my children, or the evidence of our loss when those holidays hit. So I can say that today is a good day.
Okay, I guess
Okay.
I'll go next. So thank you for asking. This is a really good question. So what does healing look like? Healing to me looks, you're in a position where you know your worth, you know your value, you have voice, and you feel like you can be a decision maker in your own life. You have been taught to trust yourself. And so in being able to trust yourself, you can trust other people around you. And you have optimistic expectation for your life. You have hope for yourself. You believe that every day you're moving step by step towards positive goals.
And for me, healing looks like an ever, pressing effort. I think it's yet to be decided what it looks like. I mean, we have a lot of people that have an opinion about what healing looks like. And I haven't come to one opinion that really, if I practice that method, it'll take me to some places. I mean, like meditation is cool, but is it cultural meditation? Is it really, connected to our ancestral, being, which we don't know what that is in many cases, because we pretty much were stripped from our identity. So what healing looks like is, to me, is really trying to connect with something that we don't know what we're connecting to, that really belongs to us, which is our own, accessory experience, our, I don't know, to link all that stuff back to where we come from. And I think everybody have a different pathway of how they would do that, but really always be mindful of our ancestors, and also trying to learn more and more about who they were, where they're from. I mean, so we have this ancestry.com. I don't know about all that because, you know, I don't know because it was not formulated by us. You know, I think we need to do our own ancestry.com. So healing to me is like yet to be determined. What it looks like, Smitty, I wish I could tell you and put a, because it's so all over the place. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to be really kind of, you know, pretty honest about mine is that, you know, I'm just always trying, you know, when I first went into mind, body, medicine, I thought that's what healing looked like for me, right? And I was trying to connect with the Mayat, Mayat Kemet civilization of meditation and yoga, because that's where we supposed to originally come from. But I got into that and I started, you know, training and learning all these things and listening to other kind of, you know, elders talking about it. I would get to a place of some point of healing and then I would, you know, I couldn't go no further. So I'm just always kind of going further and further and trying to find new ways to heal because this stuff is so deep, it's so packed, you know, you know what I mean?
I know, and I only asked that question because I think, again, if we're just talking about healing ourselves and our community and being well, I asked that question because I think sometimes, most of the time, we try to heal to what somebody else's healing, you know, levels are, what they think is normal or whatever the case is. So I don't really think I was setting out to get a final conclusion of, you know, what is healing that's going to go on for the rest of the life. I was just saying in general, because I think to each three of you guys' point, everybody's going to heal different. And my 100% of healing may look totally different than Shannon's 100% of healing. And I think we need to know that that's okay. There's no actual 100% clear definition of healing. So that's the reason I asked that question. And so with that, we've been at this an hour and a half, and I'm really pleasantly surprised. I think we're gonna wrap up now, but I will like to take this last couple of minutes just for each of you three to give a quick, maybe 1 minute closing synopsis of what you'd like to see going forward, and then also remind the people how they can get a hold of you. Dr. Kimberly, you're up first, then Ms. Ebony, and then Dr. Adele.
Thank you. And thank you all again for the invitation. And I just wanted to say, Smitty, I think you made a really good observation earlier when you think about the work that Ebony does, the work that Dr. Dale does, and the work that I do. I think we come at this from three different vantage points, but we meet somewhere in the middle, and all of our work connects in a very important way. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to work with the two of them. My main thing is connection. The people who work with our kids, they have to be committed to connecting with those kids or creating opportunities to connect with them. They can't pretend to be neutral and to just focus on lessons and focus on academics. They have to really be committed to the well-being of those children. And if they are not committed to that, then those children are being underserved.
Okay, wonderful. I thank everyone that came and showed up today. I'm grateful to be a part of this panel. I say in closing, everyone has something that they can give back. Everyone has an experience that can either help this world be a better place. Everyone has time if you don't have a monetary value to contribute. So don't count yourself out. You absolutely have something that's worthwhile, something that you can deposit into this world, some seeds that you can plant. You can water and watch it grow. Broken by Violence, you can follow me on Instagram, Broken by Violence, or on Facebook at Broken by Violence. So thanks again for the opportunity. Continue to be used.
Well, for me, I agree with both Ebony and Dr. Douglas. I just think that, you know, healing, you know, there's this old Sufi story that I like to tell when I'm doing my talks, you know, it's, you know, there was over in the East, and these wanderers and travelers were passing by this rock, and they would sit there, they would urinate on it, they would throw trash on it. I mean, it was like, you know, there's many, hundreds of years of this rock, just this ugly rock that everybody used as pretty much a toilet. And then this one wise man came by, and he sat on the rock, and he didn't urinate it on it, nor did he try to destroy the rock or just be trashy around the rock like the other people had been. He's never been by this rock before. And I think that, he was appointed or anointed in some kind of way of discernment to understand there's something about this rock that's different. And so he began to take a hammer and start chiseling at this rock and kept on hitting on this rock. And while people were steady with urinating on the rock, he kept on hitting on the rock. And all of a sudden, after many, many days of labor, the rock began to show some kind of shine and a light. And this light was, was kind of coming on him, and he continued to move more friskily and knocking down the rock. And then all of a sudden, this big shining light came through the rock. And as he kept on hammering and hammering, he realized that the rock was gold. It was gold. And so I say that in relation to our community, the Black community as a whole, it's got this coverage of all this debris on top. And it looks really ugly to the other world outside of ourselves. When we talked about all those other cultures and what their perceptions are of us, they look at us as being really the least of those. And so we, as I think in our community, I think that we, individually have to start carving away at this rock and within our own space, starting at home and then our community and the work that we do every day. And these conversations we have with our colleagues that don't look like us. And that's just chipping away at that rock. So we can bring that light to those people who have these stigmas about who we are as a people. And I just like to leave that, that story with you all. And I want to thank all the people that did participate here today. And thank you for my colleagues, and thank you for Smitty and Shannon and Troy and all the rest of you guys that put this together. And I hope that we can do this again.
Thank you to all three of you. We appreciate your time. And I would just, in summation from all of this, I got one sentence I would like to share. What you guys do as far as starting the healing process from the young age to the older adults and to Miss Ebony, who's right between. Maybe healing ourselves can maybe lead to that golden center that Dr. Odell was talking about, but we got to heal first. So let's do that.
Right.
So thank you, Dr. Kimberly, Dr. Odell, Miss Ebony. Thank you for your time. Thank you for volunteering. Thank you for being so sharing with your knowledge that hopefully, someone will see this and then share it again. And the person that might be affected may not even be watching us right now, but hopefully it gets shared to that person in need. So I ask you to just share this later on once the great Beatrice uploads it. We can share it via YouTube, Facebook, or however. So again, I just want to make sure that we understand that there's a person out there that's going to need to hear this. They just may not be on right now. So again, thank you guys. Before we get out of here, I want to say thank you to Brother Shannon and Brother Troy for letting me rock with him. Brother Brian Stewart. Brother Brian Stewart didn't speak too much today, because if we let him speak, we're going to be here another 3 hours, because he's going to give you the breakdown of real facts. But I guarantee you, we're going to get to hear him speak one day. You can follow us, Undivided, on Facebook, and that's Undivided. It's a movement. You can also check us out on YouTube under Undivided. You can find things like this here. And then also we do our weekly infocast where we give out information to the community that's helpful for my education, social impacts, political knowledge. It's all there for you to find. Thank you guys for following us. This is number 1 in our 5-part webinar series where we try to inform and encourage our community just to be involved. So with that, I'd like to say, everybody have a great day. Enjoy your Saturday. Be involved, be engaged, and be well.
All right. Thank you. Peace.
All right.
Hey, Ebony.